Okay, hello everybody, my name is Beth. Welcome to our in-session talk today. We have over 440 guests from 41 countries joining us today. And today's subject is exclusion, why design should be doing more. Before I introduce you to our esteemed speakers, Rama, Dori, Carole and Mark, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. We will share the recording on our event page at some point next week. Please use the chat button if you have any technical difficulties regarding the webinar, and we'll be able to help you. We invite you to ask any questions by using the Q&A feature. You can upvote the questions that you like the most. And any remaining unanswered questions, we'll try to get our speakers to answer and hopefully make them available on our event page. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speakers. I'm going to hand you over to Rama, who is going to start today's conversation.
Great. Thank you, Bethany. It's something of a landmark moment, and I feel that this talk is probably one of the most important talks I'll be having in 2020. I am absolutely honoured to have Carole, Dori and Mark here with us, and I will get to introducing them formally in a moment. But I wanted to start with really talking about why this panel. Why did we call this, and why did I personally call this? Well, it grew from a wonderful thing. It grew from human connection. I met Carole many years ago, and she introduced me to Dori, and Dori introduced me to Mark. So we have sort of been passing the friendship handshake to each other across the globe. And immediately talking to them, it didn't just feel like a friendship, it felt like a kinship. And a real kinship of spirit. I've been wanting to get this panel together for a very long time. So thank you to the RCA, thank you to the in-session team for making this happen. The talk is going to be a little interactive. We don't just want to share our voices, we want to hear yours. So there is a question and answer section. If you can just use the chat function on Zoom to have any technical queries, but please do ask questions and answers. We are going to be interacting with you. It struck me that the same sun rises and sets on us all every day, but that day can have a radically different experience depending on who you are, the context you're in, and race plays a role. In 2020, we hear that, we see that, we feel that more than ever. And there's been a massive change in 2020. It's not just about pandemic, it's also been about protest. And that feeling that when one human being hurts, we all hurt, has really come to the fore. When we see someone lying on the ground with their life squeezed out of them, that painful, acrid, hateful process, what sort of things does it bring up in us? And I think that has been a catalyzing force for really positive conversation. And positive conversation is what we want to have. Activism is a catalyst. And the other driver for this has been, what is the starting point after activism? What comes around activism? What can we all do as individuals and as people? And then on the other hand, there's action. We've all sat through meetings where people promise action. So for me, sometimes action has failed. And in between is an area that is defined in my head as actionism. And what is that? And I think actionism is something that we can all experience, we can all contribute to. And particularly in design, in the academy, this is important because the design touches everything. Almost everything in the world around us is designed, even nature itself. I'm sitting here in England. The English countryside has been a curated piece of landscape. It's been designed. It's not an overtly natural thing. It's not often that design and race appear in the same sentence. I love design, I hate racism. I've wanted to be a designer since I was 14. It's something that I believe with a passion can contribute positively to every conversation. And race is also personal for me. It's within me, it's around me. It's not just my lived experience, it's my living experience. And one of the reasons for having this panel here is we want to hear Carole, Dori and Mark, not about your lived experience, not just about that. We don't want you to be shackled to the past. We want to hear your living experience because that brings it to life. And when we look at design and race, the time for that conversation absolutely is now. I think moments in life can feel dark, especially in 2020, but I think only the dark truly helps you appreciate the light. And this is a statement that has carried me through these past few months. And I think when we think about racism, I feel it's the ugliest color in humanity. I think that racism starves the soul. And when design is so strongly linked to humanity, we need to shift that paradigm. We need to actively break that down and actively progress that. So that's another reason for having this talk. And finally, it's about us, not just me, not just Carole, Dori or Mark. It's also about you. We can all feel alone, regardless of race, color, culture, social background, gender, age or ability. But Gandhi said, the best and most solid work was done in the wilderness of minority. But sometimes that wilderness is lonely. So this talk is also to say that we are not alone. And in the conversations I've had with the three panelists, as friends, as peers, as teachers and as learners together, I've truly, truly felt this. So this talk is also for me, aged 15, aged 25, aged 35, and aged today. It's the talk that I wanted to have and wanted to hear when I was 15. And when these issues of race and creativity were swirling around the atoms of my very being. This talk is not about our work. You know, as we've gone into Zoom land, so many people talk about their work, but this is not about the work of the panelists. It's about them. It's about their histories and their stories. And it is also about you as well as us. So I hope we will speak with passion and purpose. We will speak inclusively of people of all races and colors coming together, because I believe very strongly two things tie us together. One is our spirit and the other is our humanity. So that is the purpose of the talk. Before I introduce the panel, I'm going to check whether everyone's awake, and we're going to have a little poll. So we're going to have a couple of polls through this talk. And the first poll, if I can ask for that to be pulled up on the screen. And this is where you get to vote. So the first poll is this. It's just taking the temperature of the room. In your opinion, when did we start seeing Black, Indigenous, or people of color lead major design organizations in Canada, the US, and Europe? So it is a little geographically specific. And again, you can think of major design organizations, major firms, etc. We're going to give you guys a little bit more time. I can still see the numbers flooding in. Look at that. It's like watching a live auction. So we're going to stop the poll there. And the winner, as you can see, is within the last 5 years. Followed closely, you know, we've got something like 50% of you in this virtual room, you know, from 45 different countries, feel that it's in the last 5 years. The next highest is 31% say never. which is an absolute term. And then we have 13% in the last 6 to 10 years, and a mere 5% seeing that 10 years ago. Well, you're very reflective of this panel, actually, because I'm just going to share the results and stop sharing. You're very reflective of this panel because one of the things I realized when we were pulling the panel together is that all of us, myself included, were the first something in the last 5 years. So Mark was the first Indigenous National President of the Society of Graphic Designers of Canada. Dori is the first Black Dean of Design anywhere. And by anywhere, I mean anywhere. And Carole is the first Black female president of the Design Management Institute, amongst many other things. So to just give you a couple of sentences on them, Mark is one of Canada's design leaders, and Mark has deep roots and experiences in designing for Canada's Indigenous communities and organizations, something he's incredibly professionally and personally passionate about. He's currently the lead designer at Animiki. This is a really, really interesting organization that works with many Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations. He's helped design websites for a large number of both First Nation and the wider community. He's created visual identities and branding for Primary Colors, Turtle Island Institute, Entrepreneur. You gave me a little bit of a tongue twister there, Mark, as well as many others. Dori Tunstall is a design anthropologist, a public intellectual, and a design advocate who's worked globally. You know, Dori first came into my consciousness when she was working as the Associate Professor of Design Anthropology and Associate Dean at Swinburne University in Australia. She wrote the bi-weekly column Undesign for The Conversation Australia. She's taught at the University of Illinois. She's organized the US National Design Policy Initiative and served as a director of Design for Democracy. I love that title. She's had many industry positions, including working for Sapient Corporation and ARC Worldwide. Carole Bilson. Carole is the president of the Design Management Institute. This is a great organization. Do check them out. They look at bringing design in management into business. She was appointed the president just a little over 5 years ago in November 2014. She introduced a number of new initiatives such as the Value Awards, the fantastic student essay competition, and a big drive of hers has been diversity, which she runs a conference in and a magazine. Before this, she was also president of Strategic Change and Innovation in a particular organization whose mission was to provide strategic and operational guidance to managers. Before that, she was VP of Global Design and Usability and Technology Support Operation at Pitney Bowes. So our panel today has an absolutely wide experience and brings a lot of wisdom. I would like to ask each of them to just start with a simple statement, a minute or two, just linking personally to the topic, stating why are you here and why this topic is important for you. So going in no particular order, just who's on my screen. Can we start with Dori?
Good morning, evening. First, I like to do a land acknowledgement. So I like to acknowledge that I'm on the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who here in Takaranto are the traditional owners and custodians of the land. These lands are treaty lands. We are under the Treaty of the Dish with One Spoon. And this is part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. a group of confederacy amongst different Indigenous communities and First Nation communities. And part of that is that we share in the resources of the land and we take only what we need. And so this is a really important way to think about inclusion and to think about what's being excluded, which in our conversations in design is to think about what are respectful relationships to the land, our respectful relationships to the Indigenous people of the land, and how many of the principles that we find in Indigenous communities are important principles by which to guide our engagement. So within that gives you a little bit of sense of where I'm at, not necessarily where I'm from, but at least where I'm at. And you know, I'm here at this panel because I adore everyone who's on this panel. I admire the work that everyone has done in terms of trying to create structures of inclusion and to break down structures of exclusion that exist in design. And this is crucial because I always say my mandate is to make it so that for my young Black, Indigenous, and POC students that they don't have to feel like they have to choose between being a professional designer and maintaining and loving their own nuanced identities. So anything that I can do or have done in my career to break that down, to expand the notion of what it means to be a professional designer, to expand the notion of what is great design, to open up a space in which they can bring their full self into their thinking and their practices in design. That is what I consider in many ways my life work, is being able to make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dori. And if we can move across the screen to Carole.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. There are three reasons, why I wanted to be here. One is timing. The second one is design, and design management needs more diversity. And the third is I'm among peers that I respect and admire. I mean, all of us are pioneers, which in one way is a blessing and in another way is a huge challenge for all of us. In terms of timing, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the need for more diversity, there's been so much talk about diversity in the States for decades, but it seems like we've moved at a snail's pace, particularly in design. And, I remember when I was considering applying to university and, people around me really didn't value creativity or design. If I said I wanted to be a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, everybody would have been kissing my toes. So it's a little bit of a lonely path. So I picked design. I was fortunate that in high school, we had a counselor who took us to different organizations to get a taste of what possible careers are. And lo and behold, didn't we stumble into the industrial design department at General Electric. Now, as a kid, I used to build and make things outside with, sticks and twigs and dirt and, you name it. So I had these early beginnings that I didn't even appreciate. And then fast forward to getting to college and seeing how few people of color there were studying design. I was the only African-American woman in my class. I was the only woman. There were only four of us, and it was me and three guys. And it did improve over time, but I saw how many of my fellows struggled, and very few ended up getting jobs in design. So I see the challenge in the pipeline all the way from kindergarten to the work world. And so the last thing I'll say is, in terms of design and design management, there's a real need for more diversity. And I can talk about that later, the kinds of things DMI is doing. But those are some of the beginnings, and I'm really honored to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much. And Mark, we didn't forget you. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank you, Rama, for including me in these discussions because they're vital. They're very important. Dori, Tunstall, I can't express how much respect and love I have for you as a leader, as a really just a fantastic person. Carole, I know we've only just met briefly, but I can tell that you are as well an outstanding a leader, a woman, inspirational. You are all inspirational to me, and I can't thank you enough. So my name is Mark Rutledge. This is my adopted name. I've got a bit of a long history, a long story that started out pretty terribly, but I think has given me the opportunities to be here today and speak to many of you. So before I begin, I always want to acknowledge my family, my ancestors. My mother is from Little Grand Rapids First Nation, Treaty 5 territory in Canada. And on my father's side, Lac Seul First Nation, Treaty 3. And I also want to recognize my adopted father, Gordon Rutledge, for whom has given me the strength, the courage, the knowledge to be who I am today. And the other thing I want to acknowledge is the territory in which I work and live and play, the Kwanlundan First Nation and the Ta'an Council territories. So please, I want to ask all of you that are listening, please take the time today to think about the Indigenous peoples in your community and just be considerate of the original peoples of the world. So that's how I usually start, is to acknowledge my ancestors, acknowledge the place that I am in. And today I also carry an eagle feather so that I can speak honestly and truthfully and respectfully today. And so that these words that I say today are from my heart and speak honestly to the topic at hand. So a little bit more about my professional experience. I've been a designer for 30 years, and I've worked in all types of agencies and studios. And I find myself today working with Animiki, an Indigenous digital studio, made up of some of the finest and most intelligent Indigenous people that I have ever come across. So I feel very blessed that I am able to continue my good work here. And the reason why I took up the national presidency at the Graphic Designers of Canada is so that I could, forge a path for the next generation. Whatever I do today will resonate for future generations. So if other young Indigenous designers or people of color can see leaders in these positions, that they can then know that, if we can do this, then they can also do this. So there's a sense of hope in that, and that hopefully will resonate through generations to come. So that is me in a nutshell, I guess. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I had a request on the questions to just say a couple of sentences about myself, because I forgot to do that. So my name is Rama Gheerawo. I'm of Indian ancestry. My ancestors left India in 1838 as indentured laborers and went to cut cane sugar in British Guyana in South America, part of the West Indies, for many generations. My mother and father then came to London in the 70s, where me and my two sisters were born. As I said, I'm passionate about design, but when I think about my reaction to some of the incredible things that you see going on around you, some of the challenges and some of the social situations, I think my response is that of a yogi. And the word yoga in Sanskrit, it comes from yukta, which means to bring into balance. So I feel my words, my actions, my conversations as a designer is exactly that. I want to delve straight into some questions and some thoughts because, Carole, you touched on the fact that if you were going to be an engineer or a doctor, that would have been fine. And I think back to my own Indian community. Luckily, my parents were incredibly enabling and allowed me to do this strange thing called design and encouraged it. But why do you think has it taken so long for there to be first directors, deans, presidents in design organizations of color or of indigenous heritage? I mean, why is that? Is that an internal community thing? Is that external influences? And I throw that open to any of the panel to respond.
Well, I think that, people of color and Black folks all around the world, came to Europe or the States through slavery or indentured servitude or whatever. And I think it's a matter of time. I mean, if you're viewed as, if you're invisible and people don't notice you or don't acknowledge your presence, it makes life that much harder. And then when you think about the fact that there are certain fields like engineering and medicine that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Yes, creativity has been around a long time, but my understanding is design, as a profession is not as old, maybe the early 1900s. I mean, people may have been practicing design, but as a profession, it's newer. So I think you have a confluence of all these challenges. And so, if you have, racism and prejudices in society, it's going to carry through in all disciplines. And I think in design, even more so. The other thing is, I've been asked a few times in the States about why I think there aren't young Black kids or kids of color studying design. And, I've had to really stop and think about this. I mean, I have some thoughts on it, but by all means, it's not based on deep research. It's just my own experiences. I think that, parents of kids of color want the best for their kids. They want their kids to be educated and be viable contributing citizens of society. And, the general perception is that if you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, you'll get a good job and you'll get paid well. What they don't realize is that there are lots of design jobs. There's lots of diversity in design, and there are very viable and, rewarding, successful, not only rewarding personally for the soul where you can make a good contribution, but you can make money at it. And so I just think that, the design community has to step up communicating and building an awareness. And so we at DMI, we're playing our small part, but we all have to do a better job at communicating the viability and the value of design. And the economics is one thing, but it's much more than that.
And I would add one more profession to your kind of trinity of the kind of sacrosanct trinity. In the Indian community, it was computer scientist.
Right.
If you were that, you were fine. And my auntie,
how could I forget that?
My aunties looked at me in horror when I was doing a master's in industrial design. And one of them actually asked me, so Rama, you'll be playing with crayons all day? So I'm going to roll that question towards Dori. And, as a Dean of Design, what barriers, there's a sort of two-part question here. One is, what barriers do you see that your students have had to overcome, especially Indigenous students, students of color, or Black students? And the second part of the question, you've told some really powerful stories about the bits that you felt you have needed to hide as a Black female, or as a Black or an African American person working in the organization. So one is aimed at your students and the other is reflected inwards to yourself.
So in terms of the barriers for my students, I think there's three major ones, which I think actually, again, speaks to Carole's answer as well. The first is that the recognition that design has actually been quite harmful for many BIPOC communities. And it's like, if you think of like the stereotypes that we have around different people from different places of the world, like that's been facilitated by design, right? Many objects of innovation and objects of innovation have made processes of colonization quite efficient. So in many ways, like the first barrier is that if you're a young BIPOC person, some of your most subconscious probably ways of experiences of the design fields have not been things that are actually quite positive, right? Like there's been sort of some negative aspects of it, and you don't connect it to the design field until much later. The second thing I think is a barrier is what, again, both you, Carole, and Robert have been talking about, which is that there's concern in the community that you're going to be a starving artist. I mean, that's what it is. Like, I talk to parents and they're like, oh, they're drawing, they're going to become a starving artist, and then I'm going to have to like take care of them forever, and I can barely take care of them now. And so one of the, and again, why, in many ways at OCAD University, like we have twice as many design students than we do in the Faculty of Art. And the reason why is that it is easier to convince your parents to perhaps go into design because it is tied to industry in some ways. There's a job that comes at the end of your study. But then the big challenge, and like a couple of weeks ago, we had a big forum of like both our Black and then our BIPOC students, is that the education is still Eurocentric. The education erases who they are and tells them that the nuances of their cultural expressions, whether that's from the Caribbean or whether that's from Europe, whether that anywhere in the world, like if you're not Swiss or Dutch, heritage, male, heterosexual, I mean, all of this sort of categories of who is put up as expertise. If you're not that, then you have to get the grade, and this is what they say, to get the grade, I had to erase myself. To get the grade, I had to change the sense of my aesthetics. And then to follow up, to be able to get the job afterwards, I had to continue, and I have to continue to do the same thing. And so my job is, to try to change that, And part of that is, like, this is the first job that I've been in where I've been given the safety, because I'm, regardless of my deanship, I'm a tenured professor, and that means it is extremely difficult. No matter what I do, they can fire me as dean, but they can't fire me from the institution. And so but again, it's very real, like to have that material fearlessness, right? To be able to not have to fear that I won't be able to pay my rent because I have done something is really important, right? That's really important. in terms of feeling I can bring my authentic self into this role. And it's the first time, like, you know, the way I dress, and again, posting my Dean Drag, my hashtag Dean Drag every morning, I mean, I love fashion, style.
Yeah.
I have like a large collection of textiles. I love hanging out with sort of designers in that co-creation process. But it is also a very deliberate strategy to say, you can be in this position as dean and bring your full self into this role, right? That you can, I had a sari summer where I have a large collection of saris for a woman who's not of South Asian heritage.
I've seen them.
But I wore, like, I would choose one week and I would use YouTube videos to do it. And it was explicitly because some of my South Asian students were like, I don't feel comfortable wearing the clothes of my community. It's probably the best way to say that. And then they said afterwards, seeing me rock all these different saris with all of these different drapings that I learned off of YouTube, that it literally in the elevator, they're like, oh, I should wear more of like the clothing of my community, right?
Yeah.
And so I do the same thing in terms of wearing lots of African dress. I do the same. I support the designers that I do support are all Black, Indigenous, and POC, and I'm always listing who they are. And that's a deliberate strategy to say, bring your full self into this institution, because I'm bringing my full self into this institution. And then because I'm in this position of power in the institution, I will try to, as much as possible, protect you so that you can feel you can bring your full self into the institution as well, right? And so, and again, all these things I would never have worn a sari in my previous industry jobs. I did wear a sari once when I was teaching at at Swinburne University. I think that was another place where I was trying to taking up space authentically to create space for others to feel like they can do that. But I would say when I was in industry, no way.
And before we come on to Mark, could I just ask a quick follow-up of why wouldn't you wear those clothings in industry? And, you know, I speak of this as a great stalker of your Instagram feed and a great lover of, just the vibrancy that you bring to my mornings.
Because I knew I would get punished. I mean, there's no other way. I knew I would get punished for it. Because again, it's thing is like, you know, like I got punished anyway. So even I knew in industry bringing, you know, like the sound of music, the music that I was listening to on, you know, even through my headphones, the kinds of decorations, for example, that I had at my desk. All of those things I already was getting kind of, let's say, side eyes about and for, that just made it so, and I knew I wasn't in a position of like power enough that if they wanted to shut me down, right, that I could advocate for it. And I've left working institutions when I have realized that, my desire to bring my full self into the institution was not welcomed and was threatened. And then I got bullied in many cases for trying to do that. So this is where I'm saying, like, the financial protection layer that I have, all of those things become more important, because it's like, at this point, I'm fearless. I'm really like at a level of fearlessness that, I've not been able to experience before in my professional career. Because it was, again, like, I've left institutions because they created an environment of ostracization. They created an environment of retaliation, probably would be the word for it. For, let's say, bringing even important concepts of like, you should be more respectful of the way in which you interact with me. And interact with others, right? In terms of how you do a critique, right? Like that, I literally got ostracized and bullied an institution for just bringing that up, right? In a direct way.
It's such a hurtful but common story, and I want to bring that to Mark, because when we first spoke, some of the stories you said actually had me in tears in the first 10 minutes. But one of the things you talked about was bringing the values of your cultural heritage into design, and you spoke about 7 things that are embedded into your culture, 7 values. And if designers just listen to that, they would have more of the reverence and the respect that Dori's talking about. So I wondered if you could just respond a little bit to that and how you bring those cultural values into your design expression.
Okay, yeah, that's great. There's so much to talk about, and I've got all these thoughts going through my mind. The issues surrounding people of color, Black, Indigenous designers in this field. Carole brought great comments about education, and Dori as well. There are barriers to education. Anyhow, I just wanted to acknowledge you two again for that. In terms of culture, in terms of my culture, I'm Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and so we have what's called the 7 grandfather teachings. And these teachings are passed on from generation to generation, and they are really a roadmap to leading what we call a good life. And so these can be applied to yourself, but also to your business. The company I work for, Animiki, has instilled these 7 values within their corporate culture, which is something that I believe has never been done before. And that really affects our relationship with our clients or the organizations that we work for, but also within the social structure of the company as well. So the 7 grandfather teachings. Number 1 is humility. Humility is generally represented by the wolf. For the wolf, life is lived for his pack, and the ultimate shame is to be an outcast. Humility is to know that you are a sacred part of creation. Live life selflessly and not selfishly. Respect your place and carry your pride with your people and praise the accomplishments of all. Do not become arrogant and self-important. Find balance within yourself and all living things. Number 2 is bravery, which is represented by the bear. The mother bear has the courage and strength to face her fears and challenges while protecting her young. The bear also shows us how to live a balanced life with rest, survival, and play. To face life with courage is to know bravery. Find your inner strength to face the difficulties of life and the courage to be yourself. Defend what you believe in and what is right for your community, family, and self. Make positive choices and have a conviction in your decisions. Face your fears to allow yourself to live your life. Number 3 is honesty. Honesty is represented by the raven and Sabe. Sabe, they both understand who they are and how to walk in their life. Sabe reminds us to be ourselves and not someone we are not. An honest person is said to walk tall like Kichisabe. Like Kichisabe, Raven accepts himself and knows how to use his gift. He does not seek the power, speed, or beauty of others. He uses what has been given to survive and thrive. So to walk through life with integrity is to know honesty. Be honest with yourself, recognize and accept who you are, accept and use the gifts you have been given. Do not seek to deceive others or yourself. Number 4 is wisdom. The beaver represents wisdom because he uses his natural gift wisely for survival. The beaver also alters the environment in an environmentally friendly and sustainable way for the benefit of his family. To cherish knowledge is to know wisdom. Use your inherent gifts wisely and live your life by them. Recognize your differences and those of others in a kind and respectful way. Continuously observe the life of all things around you. Listen with clarity and a sound mind. Respect your own limitations and those of all of your surroundings. Allow yourself to learn and live by your wisdom. Number 5 is truth. Truth is represented by the turtle, as he was here during the creation of Earth and carries the teachings of life on his back. The turtle lives life in a slow, meticulous manner because he understands the importance of both the journey and the destination. Truth is to know all of these things. Apply faith and trust in your teachings. Show honor and sincerity in all that you say and do. Understand your place in this life and apply the understanding in the way that you walk. Be true to yourself and all other things. Number 6 is respect. Respect is represented by the buffalo. The buffalo gives every part of his being to sustain the human way of living, not because he is of less value, but because he respects the balance and needs of others. To honor all creation is to have respect. Live honorably in teachings and in your actions towards all things. Do not waste and be mindful of the balance of all living things. Share and give away what you do not need. Treat others the way you would like to be treated. And do not be hurtful to yourself or others. And finally, number 7. Now this is very important, and I think we need more of this in the world. Number 7 is love. The eagle represents love because he has the strength to carry all the other teachings. The eagle has the ability to fly highest and closest to the Creator, and also has the sight to see all the ways of being from great distances. The eagle's teachings of love can be found in the core of all teachings. Therefore, an eagle feather is considered the highest honor and sacred gift. To know love is to know peace. View your inner self from the perspective of all teachings. This is to know love and to love yourself truly. Then you will be at peace with yourself, the balance of life, all things, and also with the Creator. So, that was pretty long, but you know what? I mean, there are many other teachings that surround it, and there are various interpretations of it, but these are the teachings that I have come to learn, and that when applied to your life, you will lead a good life.
No, absolutely, Mark. And I think I'm going to, I think humility, bravery, honesty, wisdom, truth, respect, and love. It's almost a seven-word mandate for design encapsulated in that wisdom. So thank you for that.
Well, that's the really interesting thing, Rama, is that so we have Indigenous faculty in design at OCAD. So, and one of them, Howard Monroe, what he's done is he's actually aligned the 7 grandfather teachings with the design process. And so let's say our research phase, right, in the design process is bravery. And the intention of doing that, especially in the first year foundation of industrial design, was to, again, shift the focus, like part of the decolonizing design, where it's not about the output of what you do in the design phase, but it's actually the internal cultivation that you bring as a person into the way in which you engage with the process of making. And so what's been really amazing, right, like again, is that we're building these principles into our curriculum, right? And again, they're valuable not just in terms of like our Indigenous students who see, again, their ideals represented now in what is designed, but again, it makes everyone else better people, right? Better people. And thus, what we're hoping is that they also be better designers because of that. And redefining the notion of actually what it means to be a good designer. It's like a good designer is a person who has values that make sure they live a good life.
Yeah, I think that is one of the core things in design education. I always talk about human first, designer second. And that being the right way around. We're going to do, time has flown, actually. And we want to get onto some questions, there is a Q&A box on the Zoom. So please do fire questions, vote for questions. Some of them that are at the top, I'm going to read out some of them, is how much this is by someone called Anonymous Attendee, how much do the panelists feel that the lack of diversity in design educators, how much does that play in terms of the lack of diversity in the students? And I know, Dori, you have done this tenure track hire.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you might say a little bit about that, and then I'm going to fire some questions at Mark and Carole. As we've just got a little time left, if we can keep the answers a little succinct, that would be great.
Right. It's directly correlated, and we know this through 2 years ago at OCAD University, we had an Indigenous cluster hire where we brought in 5 new Indigenous faculty to the university. We've had Indigenous faculty at OCAD since 10 years before, but we hadn't had any Indigenous faculty in design. So 3 of those 5 came into design. And the thing that happened is that once that was visible and announced, that again, our Indigenous students who were already there at OCAD, more of them began to self-identify, because some of them have chosen not to self-identify because they didn't feel it was safe to be able to do so. So automatically, those begin to self-identify and then bring more of their identity with that. Just recently, actually they're starting tomorrow, we've had a Black cluster hire where we've brought in 5 new Black faculty members, the first time in 144 years having full-time Black faculty at OCAD. And already we know from the conversations, like I said, that I'm having with parents, the conversations that I'm having with Black youth, is that we should expect our numbers to increase because of our existing students. We've answered their question as to how do we begin to diversify our curriculum, because they're all creating different curriculum than what's existing or changing it. But it's a clear signal, right, that we are taking decolonization, diversity, and equity seriously and visibly. So then parents, when the young people are having their conversation with their parents as to, is this a place that's safe, right, for me to go to, the presence of such diverse faculty and at a certain level of critical mass means that parents are more confident in saying, yes, it's okay for you to go there. I know even since I've arrived at OCAD, 4 years ago, that I have the conversations with the students and the parents, and they're like, we're going to let them come because you're here. And I'm like, great, we'll embrace them. So it's directly correlated. So if you don't have diverse faculty, it's harder to recruit more diverse students, right?
And I guess, one thing is it's not just about single faculty, but it's actually creating that cluster so they're supported. Carole, I'm going to fire a question at you from Marga Lopez, who says, design is a very white industry because it doesn't pay enough, like law, medicine, or engineering. So only privileged people usually make a career out of their studies and investment. What do you think the design community can do to help build equity to support BIPOC designers so they can actually invest in their career?
Okay, that was a lot, but I would say, design, there's so many things happening right now, and Rama, can you just give me the first part of that? Because I
it's
lost
a very
it.
white industry, so it doesn't pay enough.
Okay, stop right there. Stop. Okay, you can stop right there. That's not true. There are about 40 different majors of design today. When I went to school, there were 5. Design pays very well. It starts out modest, but it can increase dramatically. It probably depends on what majors you select. So I'm just going to take a wild guess. If there are 40 majors in design, there are probably 20 or 25 that are extremely lucrative. In the last 10 years, a lot of companies have been elevating design to the C-suite level, right below the CEO. And there are a lot of design CEOs of medium and smaller companies. And in the last 5 to 7 years, a lot of financial firms have been snapping up small and medium-sized firms all over the world. So design is absolutely lucrative and it absolutely pays. For me, the issue is, how do we get our youth more who are creatively inclined or innovatively inclined, more engaged at all levels? So, at the elementary level and high school level, to me, the issue is lack of awareness. If you don't know it exists, you don't know what the opportunities are, you don't see people that look like you, and you don't know there are viable jobs, you're not going to pursue it. At the college and university level, where a handful may find out and get to that level, they don't have the support necessarily. They might need a mentor, a sponsor. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to interview Noel Mayo, who is the first African-American industrial designer to own his own firm. He has over 1,200 patents, and he's still actively working in his 80s. He is responsible for mentoring hundreds of students who are extremely successful. And it's his own tenacity and passion. There were kids that were going to get thrown out of school. And through his own passion and tenacity, he created summer programs where he gave his time and he saved them. He helped them. And so that's often what it takes. It starts out one by one, and then you build this whole village. So I know we're getting short on time. So Rama, I'll hand it back to you.
No, thank you. I have a question from Mark here from Melanie Flory. So these questions have been voted up by everyone. She says, to get the grade, I had to erase myself. This is far beyond compromise. Can you talk about how we, the big we, ensure that the current generation of designers and students and the generations to come don't have to repeat this painful experience? So Mark, some thoughts on that?
When my academic journey, I guess, started when, sorry, let me just restart this, because in terms of identity, myself, my identity was stripped from me when I was forcefully removed from my family, my biological family. That was called the 60 scoop. That sort of followed after the residential schools in Canada. So the 60 scoop happened during the 60s, but still is happening today. So the forceful removal of children from their biological family. It's a form of genocide. How do you quickly remove an entire race of people? Well, you remove them from their family, their culture, their roots. And so my experience, that erasure happened at a very young age. And I was adopted into a non-Indigenous family, a white family in Toronto. And so I was given a new name. My history was removed. So I was given a new name, Mark Rutledge. Now, I carry that name still because out of respect for my adopted father, whom I love very much. But that erasure happened at a very young age. So how do I come to terms with that? That's a difficult question to answer, because it all depends on an individual's life journey and those experiences that led to where they are now. For me, I guess that sometimes it's benefited me. On a resume, I can put my name. I can put all of my credentials on there when I'm applying for a job. And it's a white name. It's an Irish name. But then when I go into that interview, they're completely shocked. I'm like, your name does not reflect your actual physical appearance. So, you know, whether I've hid that or not on purpose, it really didn't come to my attention until I was much older in life. And I look back and I realized that my name, my colonial name, I guess, opened doors for me in a sense, but also closed them, because then they look at me as a brown Indigenous man. So it's a difficult question to answer, simply because for me it's always been somewhat of a challenge. For me, at a time when I was younger, it was I tried to hide my identity because I was ashamed of it. Mm-hmm. Because society looked down upon Indigenous people as people that were less than, that begged, were dirty, were less intelligent than anybody else. So I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to be stereotyped in that way. So I kind of hid behind my adopted family name for a long time. But but then as I grew and matured, I really recognized that, I shouldn't be ashamed of who I am or for where I come from. And so that began another part of my life where I began to really courageously identify with my heritage, and that I should be proud of this, that I come from generations of people that are proud of who they are. And so, when we talk about hidden identities, for a time I did, but over time I began to recognize that it's courageous to be and to stand who you really are, to acknowledge that truth, that you shouldn't ever be ashamed of where you come from.
Yeah, Mark, it's, that was a story that kind of touches the heart at an incredibly human level. And I know we're a little bit over time, but I don't want to bring the guillotine down on this yet. We're hitting our stride now. And I think a topic like this, with a panel like this, really deserves a 2-hour in session. We actually have someone who's posted, and it's been liked, that we need to have session 2 of this. So, I'm up for this if you guys are. And Peter and Bethany, we need to do that. I just wanted to end really with one question, and that is how, and it's kind of amalgamating a lot of the questions that are in there, but if each of the panel can just give us a couple of final closing sentences here on when there's so much fracture and fractiousness around race and around, BIPOC people getting into education, but not necessarily into the field. What is the message that you would want to say to your younger self, or to the people on this panel? What is one change that you would ask to see, not even next week, but in the next day, in the next minute? What is one thing you would like to see and say to them? It could be a wish, or it could be an actuality. I love wishes. So who wants to go first? Just raise your hand.
I'll do. I would say I was very shy when I was in college. And believe it or not, I still have shyness, even though I have a public position. You really should have the courage to reach out to people and understand, you have to find supporters. You have to find mentors. You have to find people that you have a connection with. Because if you find that adult or that experienced professional who feels a chemistry or connection with you, they will bend over backwards. They will go to the moon for you. I was so shy and so scared of design professionals. I would go to these events, these social or design events, and I would just stand in the corner with the other students. So I encourage students. We've all been students before. And yes, not everybody's going to reach out and embrace you, but you should really work to meet people and to try to find mentors, because they can help you in so many ways you can't even imagine. I could have saved myself a lot of headaches if I had found mentors much earlier in my career in life.
So important. And Dori, it looks like your microphone is off. So
Yeah.
On.
So actually, I think my message is one that I received this morning from a friend of mine, Sesna, which is like, love yourself so hard that it turns you on. I think, so again, we haven't dismantled institutional racism. We haven't dismantled social racism. We've made some progress in some areas, but we haven't dismantled it. We haven't even dismantled, the sort of white supremacist assumptions that exist in design. So the thing that carries you through all of this is really to love yourself, to love, and it's a journey, right? Like it's a journey that I'm still, learning even now, right? Is how to do that. But it's the earlier you learn that, right? The more resilience and faith and fearlessness, right? In some ways, fearlessness you'll have in terms of being able to create the life that you want to have, right? Because a lot of the joy that I feel in the world right now is definitely tied to that sense of fearlessness, and that fearlessness comes from the fact that, like, regardless of what society says about me, regardless of like a terrible meeting that I had, with a potential donor, that I know that I'm on the path of the own truth of myself, right? I'm on the path of the own truth of myself. And that is actually what it means to love yourself, right? Is to be on the path of your own truth of yourself. So if you learn that earlier in your life and earlier in your career, you will be invincible, right? You'll be invincible.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Dori. I wish we could have bottled that. And Mark.
Dori, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say to my younger self, have the courage to be fearless. When I first heard about the profession of graphic design, I was in high school, and my guidance counselor said, no, you don't want to be an artist. You're not going to make enough money. You need to go into computer science. So I, not having the courage to say, what, I want to be an artist. And I didn't have that courage because I was fearful of having a career that wouldn't be fulfilling. So I went into computer science for a year, and I hated it. Not to dismiss that career path, but it wasn't for me. And so I mustered up the courage to tell my dad that, Dad, this isn't a career for me. I need to do something else, something more creative. And that moment, in that pivotal moment, really showed me that don't be afraid to ask those questions. Don't be afraid to seek permission to do something. So when I made that decision to enter the design field, it was life-changing for me. So to be fearless is to have that courage. That goes back to the 7 grandfather teachings. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, when you enter into college or university, it's very expensive. So that's one of the other barriers that we all have. It's a social economic barrier that we have. And so a couple of years ago, I started a scholarship in my mother's name, the Sherilyn Rutledge Northern Indigenous Student Award. And that really helps other students that are entering the field or are in the field in class, help them in some small way to financially stabilize them. It's $1,000 scholarship that we give away to an Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, or Inuit student. So, with me being in these leadership positions, starting these initiatives, it really encourages, I believe, the next generation of Indigenous, Black, or people of color designers or creatives, to be able to, if they see others in these positions, they can then see the possibility of themselves in the same field.
Yeah.
It's sort of a mirror. So if I can see someone of indigeneity leading a national organization, then I can do that too. So I'm sort of breaking trail for them. We all are all breaking trail for people of color. Dori and Carole, you guys are trail breakers. And Rama, you are as well, man. I mean, to see people of color in these positions is motivating, is uplifting, is encouraging that next generation. And I hope that some of those next generations, the youth, are participating and watching this right now, because I look and I see you, and I encourage you to keep going, to live your life without fear. Take that step into a life that is worth, the good life is worth living. And that, mentorship, man, if you guys need mentors or looking to have a mentor, you cannot, there's Dori, there's Carole, there's Rama, there's myself. You guys and people can call upon us, can call upon me at any time for words of advice, wisdom, encouragement. Please let me help you, because you know what? That's why I am in these positions, because I want to be able to encourage the next generation, and so that we can make this change, that we can lead a better future. I also wanted to say in closing that we need to ensure that we include all Indigenous, Black, and people of color in these communities, and bring them to the table. We want to be inclusive and be mindful that diversity can only make any project better. Technology and globalism make this vital and necessary as it leads to more innovation. The design field cannot advance without contrasting ideas from different viewpoints.
So, Mark, we're going to have to draw a curtain here. I'm so sorry to it feels like it cuts you off at the last sentence. I really want to thank you all for your generosity. I want to, echo Mark's generous statement of, we are here to learn from each other, to support each other. I think I'm certainly motivated and want to have part 2 of this on the other side of the summer. So watch this space, because I think we will do this in a longer way, with more time for discussion and discursion. I wanted to end with something, when you talk about fear, and fear has been this recurring thing that's kind of ever present. And it's there, it exists for everyone, but it's a part of this conversation. And I honestly believe that you get fear and faith in equal measure. My father passed away on the 1st of January as New Year's came in. So we were driving to say goodbye to him in a care home as the world was erupting into celebration. And the one thing that I remember from the last 6 hours with him was understanding, love, and most of all, faith. And something I wrote there has really helped me in my own journey this year, especially when it comes to design, race, and exclusion. It's a really short reading, but I wanted to end with that. And it's this: I ask that my faith is tied to no person, not even myself. I ask that my faith is shackled by no situation, not even my own. I ask that my faith knows no limits, not even ones I create. I know my faith lives beyond place, lives beyond people, lives beyond position, or even perception. So why is it that I search everywhere for it, except that place where it is most vibrant, within. Hold faith dear to you, and it will carry you with a gentle caress, and fix you with such strength that the slippery fingers of fear and doubt can never clasp you. Hold it with such light that its brilliance shines through you, and your faith becomes all faith, and all faith becomes yours. So with that, that's my honest wish and prayer for you all. Much love to everyone. Most of you stayed on for the extra 15 minutes. It's really worth it. So bless you, love and light, until we meet again.
Thank you, Rama, Carole, Dori and Mark for your thoughts and your expertise. And thank you to everyone who joined us for today's in-session talk. If you have any additional questions or you would like to connect directly with the ExecEd team and or the speakers, please use the contact information on this slide. And please follow us on social media at RCA Short Courses on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure to check our event webpage for upcoming in-session talks and how to register for free. Thank you all for your time and goodbye.